Hey everyone, Jeff Martins here, and we want to welcome you to our Southridge online message. If this is your first time tuning in with us, a special welcome to you. We're glad that you're interested in what we're up to together as we seek to follow Jesus in our community and share his love with others. If you're part of our community but are catching up online, maybe because you weren't able to join us on Sunday, or maybe it's been a while since you've come to one of our services, we want you to know that we miss you. But we're grateful that we can all benefit from and participate in what we're learning together through our weekly messages in this format. For any and all of us, when and as you're able, we invite you to consider joining us on Sunday mornings in either our Vineland or Welland or here at our St. Catharines location, because there's something life-giving about experiencing and sharing the love of Jesus when we get together as a community. If you'd like to connect with us further this week, we invite you to fill out our online Connect card, or if you're interested in joining a group, volunteering to serve, exploring spiritual practices, maybe taking a step towards baptism, or perhaps contributing financially, you can do and find all of that stuff through our website as well. Most of all today, we hope you know you are welcome, you are loved, and we pray that Jesus speaks something meaningful to your heart and life this week through this week's message. Let's check it out together.
Well, this August, we have been talking about God's design for the church, how this thing we're all part of is supposed to actually work. And we began in week 1 with Jen Surtees explaining that church work is not merely the contribution of a few paid professionals, the products and services provided by church staff to be paid for and consumed by the rest. But actually, biblically, church work is the work of all of us, the shared investments of all God's saints and ministers, priests and clergy, words that in the Bible actually are used to describe all of us. Then Jeff Martins explained that in order to equip us for this work, God has given us spiritual gifts, special talents and abilities we all have that are meant to be used to build up the church. And then Carrie Jones, she gave us a crash course on all the diverse range of gifts and how they're all designed to work together. And if you haven't yet done the spiritual gifts assessment that we made available, then I want to encourage you to do that. You can find it on our website or get a copy at the Welcome Center. And then last week, finally, Jeff Lockyer clarified that the gifts we have are not meant to be used for our own personal fulfillment, but to serve others, to build up the body as a whole. This is God's design for the church, to be a body of individual body parts, each uniquely gifted to contribute in a unified and others-oriented way to continue the mission and work of Jesus in the world. Now imagine with me for a moment a church actually living out that vision, a community committed to not just going to church, but actually being the church, where we don't just consume its ministries, but we actually all contribute vitally to its mission, giving the best of ourselves, our time, talents, and treasures, our expertise and experience, our passions, and our unique perspectives to help us all embody the presence of Christ in the world with all the gifts firing on all cylinders. Imagine a church where skilled teachers open our minds to new ideas and gifted leaders help all of us realize our full potential, where prophetic disruptors speak truth to power and those with gifts of wisdom and discernment help guide and advise us, where those with the uncanny ability to share Christ in a winsome way are bringing in new believers, while artists are creating beautiful songs and stories and paintings and poetry, where hospitality experts are creating warm and welcoming spaces for community and connection, while those with gifts of mercy are caring for and comforting the sick and suffering, where those with healing gifts are curing illnesses, and those with helping gifts are coming alongside the rest of us. Those skilled at administration are helping to organize and manage people and tasks efficiently and effectively, and financial and business wizards are helping us maximize meager budgets, while those with more hands-on gifts, like the tech geeks and the neat freaks, the roofers and repair workers are helping to maintain and take care of our infrastructure, while those with extraordinary faith are moving mountains with their prayers. And the ones who always seem to have just the right words to say are encouraging those who are struggling. Imagine being part of a church like that where all the gifts are operating at full capacity. Imagine the church being the place in Niagara where people come from far and wide to discover what makes them special, how God has uniquely gifted them, only to discover that those gifts exist within a larger network of gifts that when we bring them together contribute to making the world a better place for everyone. Imagine being part of a church like that. And then imagine coming to the end of your life and standing before Jesus, awaiting the life-affirming words, "Well done, good and faithful servant," only to learn that all of our work and effort and activity was for nothing. That a church like that could be seen by God as worthless. Because as we come to the end of this month-long series exploring the spiritual gifts and how the church works, that is exactly the imaginative journey that the Apostle Paul takes us on in his letter that we call 1 Corinthians. Now, as with all scripture, Paul's letters were inspired by God and written for us, but they weren't written directly to us. In order to understand God's message to us through them, we need to first appreciate how they were intended to their original audience, the church in Corinth. Now, the Corinthians were an exciting, new, wealthy and influential, charismatic and highly gifted church that the Apostle Paul had planted only a few years earlier. And you can read that story in the book of Acts, chapter 18. But since planting the church, the Apostle Paul had begun to receive reports that despite how insanely gifted they all were, something was amiss in Corinth, at least in part because of how they were using their spiritual gifts. Now, before diving right into the concern, Paul begins his letter by reminding the Corinthians who they were before they met Jesus. He writes in chapter 1, "Brothers and sisters, think of what you were when you were called. Not many of you were wise by human standards. Not many were influential. Not many were of noble birth." He's saying they were pretty ordinary, if not subpar, pretty underwhelming people. But all that changed when they encountered Jesus. They actually suddenly, almost overnight, became like supercharged humans, energized and enabled by the Spirit with new special talents and abilities. Paul says, "For in Jesus, you have been enriched in every way, with all kinds of speech and all knowledge. You do not lack any spiritual gift." I mean, imagine that, enriched in every way, with all knowledge. I mean, in a kind of rags to riches story, the Corinthians had gone from being societal zeros to spiritual heroes, from chronically underwhelming to consistently outperforming all of the churches. The Corinthians had the most charismatic leaders, the most eloquent teachers, the most influential pastors, and most inspiring worship leaders with the most effective community outreach strategies with programs for people of all ages and stages. They had the slickest website, the friendliest greeters, the cleanest bathrooms, the tastiest coffee. I mean, Corinth was the it church, the one-stop shop for all your church shopping needs with world-class programming and can't-miss events. So gifted were they, in fact, that it became almost like an unofficial competition in Corinth to see who was the most extraordinarily gifted, with their worship gatherings devolving into almost like an episode of Corinth's Got Talent, with each member trying to outdo the other. And rather than pouring cold water on their eagerness and desire to excel in the gifts, the Apostle Paul concludes 1 Corinthians chapter 12 by urging them, actually encouraging them to eagerly desire the greater gifts. Paul is playing into their desire to be a great church. And then he leans in tantalizingly, almost as if whispering a great secret to them. And he says, "I will show you the most excellent way." Let me show you the most excellent way. I mean, you can sense he has their attention, the anticipation they would have felt turning from 1 Corinthians 12 over to chapter 13, where they would read for the very first time words now made famous all over the world by almost every single wedding you've ever been to, where the Apostle Paul writes, "If I speak in the tongues of humans or of angels, but do not have love, I am only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have a faith that can move mountains but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor and give my body to hardship that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing." Whew, you can feel the gut punch. I mean, first of all, imagine being so spiritually gifted that you can have conversations with angels, that you actually understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and that you have the kind of faith that can alter reality with your prayers. And you have the kind of generosity that can empty your savings account to fill the pockets of the poor and give your body over to be harmed, even killed for the cause of Christ, only to discover that it was all for nothing. To maybe the most gifted church ever assembled, the Apostle Paul warns us that without love, all the talent of the world, all I am, all I have, and all I can do is nothing. It's worthless, meaningless. It's just a bunch of noise and nonsense. Friends, this isn't a wedding verse. This is a wake-up call. In my own life, having spent my entire adult life doing church work professionally, it calls for personal reflection. When I was younger, my early spiritual development was greatly impacted by being invited in to contribute to the work of the church. As I discovered and developed and then deployed my spiritual gifts, it gave me a sense of purpose, like I had something to contribute to the kingdom of God. And I quickly became convinced that if everyone around me could discover, develop, and deploy their spiritual gifts, they would also experience that same sense of purpose. So I, together with many of our leaders, devoted my energies to helping people explore their spiritual gifts and put them to use. And pretty soon, we started to almost resemble that church we were imagining earlier. I mean, if you had the gift, we had the gig. If you had a passion, we would build a program around it. Our anchor causes awakened the spiritual gifts of those with like mercy and helps gifts, and life groups became a kind of playground for those with hospitality and pastoral gifts. Teachers and evangelists and artists turned our weekend gatherings into an explosion of kaleidoscopic worship and creativity. And as the parade of people joined the movement, we actually had to enlist the help of local police to help manage traffic flow on and off our parking lots every weekend. But as I drove off the parking lot many Sundays, I began to wonder to myself, was anything of eternal significance actually happening? And it wasn't just me. I mean, many of our leaders began wondering, despite our apparent success, were we even really being a church at all? Despite all our work and creativity, our passionate worship, our generous giving, our mountain-moving faith, had the kingdom of God gained even an inch? Or were our sermons and songs just resounding gongs and clanging cymbals? I mean, we had engaged hundreds and hundreds of people in church work, but had we lost sight of what the work of the church really is? Jesus had made it so clear to his first followers, where he says to them, recorded in John chapter 13, "A new command I give you, love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another." The only point of being the church or of being a disciple is to follow Jesus into a life of love, to be formed by love into love, all for the sake of love, learning to love ourselves and one another, and to love our neighbors and strangers and even our enemies, to fulfill the one command of Jesus, to love God by loving others. Pastor and author Eugene Peterson put it this way. He wrote that love is not what we do after we get the other things done, if we have any energy left over. Love is what we do, period. It is not how we work, it is our work. The Apostle Paul said it like this in Galatians 5:6. The only thing that counts is faith expressing itself through love. Love, friends, is the work of the church. It is what we do. And according to Paul, it is the only thing we do that really counts. Period. Everything else is meaningless. 1 Corinthians 13 makes this impossible to ignore. The only reason to even have spiritual gifts is to better equip and enable us to embody and express the love of Christ in the world. And you can't actually achieve your God-given purpose by leveraging the full potential of your giftedness alone. True meaning, purpose, and fulfillment only comes when we leverage the full potential of our gifts to leverage the full potential of love together. Love is the only thing that connects our lives to what is eternal. Spiritual gifts, on the other hand, Paul says, are only temporary. He goes on in 1 Corinthians 13 to write that where there are prophecies, they will cease, and where there are tongues, they will be stilled. Where there is knowledge, it will pass away. All this is contrasted by the idea that love alone never ends. In fact, Paul goes on to say that even things like faith and hope will one day pass away until all that remains is love, the greatest of gifts, the most excellent way. When a church community like ours harnesses and employs all the gifts of the Spirit in the work of love, things like leadership are less about exerting power over people and more about leveraging influence to inspire more love. And teaching gifts aren't about giving academic talks, they're about training us all in the way of love. Wisdom and discernment isn't about being the smartest person in the room. It's about helping us navigate what love looks like in tricky situations. Things like evangelism are less about conversion and more about compassion. Administration is less about crossing T's and dotting I's and more about ordering chaos into care. Hospitality isn't just about helping somebody find a place to sit. It's about helping people find a place to belong. The artists discover that their true craft is actually finding creative expressions of kindness. And mercy gifts enable us to be engaged activists that aren't easily angered. Prophetic language flows out of patient listening. And we're able to serve without being self-seeking and encourage others without envy. This is what it looks like to eagerly desire the greater gifts. This is the most excellent way to actually be a church that exercises the gifts under the influence of love. See, the Corinthians, they knew what it was like to be nothing, to feel like a bunch of nobodies from nowhere. But they made the mistake of thinking that it was their giftedness that would make them great, not realizing that exercising the gifts without love was sending them on a one-way ticket back to Nowheresville, back to being nothing. See, spiritual gifts alone cannot make us a great church. In fact, to paraphrase Mother Teresa, there are no great churches, only churches with great love. Friends, this is God's vision for the church. To be a community of people exercising our gifts together in a way that is full of love, that is fueled by love, that is forming us into love, all for the sake of love. Or as the Apostle Paul put it in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 16, God makes the whole body fit together perfectly, and as each part does its own special work, it helps the other parts grow so that the whole body is healthy and growing and full of love. That's what this whole conversation about spiritual gifts and how the church works has been about. It's not about volunteer recruitment or how to get more church work done. It's not about trying to be the greatest or the most gifted church in town. It's been about inviting all of us to participate in and contribute to the real work of the church, the work of love, of being a body that is built by love, being built into love, all because of love. So as we wrap up this month-long series, let me take you on one last imaginative journey. Let's imagine together what it would be like for us to be a church where all the gifts of the Spirit are brought together to help us and enable us to embody the love of Christ to each other and to the world around us. I want you to imagine being part of a church With a guy like Gary, who, as a retired truck driver, now puts his driving skills to use, bringing cancer patients to and from their medical appointments to show them Christ's love. Imagine being a church where someone like Paula, having raised her kids into adulthood, now puts her parenting skills to work in her housing complex, becoming like a surrogate mom to the neighborhood kids so they can know the love of Jesus. Imagine being church with someone like Kathy, who shows up on Friday nights to scrub dishes with her gift of helps as we serve the love of Christ on a plate at Harvest Kitchen. Imagine being part of a church with a guy like Doug, who opens his woodworking shop to build a friendship with a guy like Dennis, who then in that shop uses his craftsmanship gifts to make presents for kids at Christmas so they'll experience the love of Jesus. Imagine being part of a church with a guy like David, who shows up every Sunday with his hospitality gift to greet people, and in the process meets a person like Linda, who has encouragement gifts, and as they get to know each other, she encourages and supports him through his cancer journey. And then when Linda's son passes away, David shows up unasked to be a room host, to show hospitality to the guests at the funeral, just two people passing love back and forth through their pain. Or imagine being a part of a church where former pastors and school teachers like Ian and Rena come out of retirement to use their teaching gifts to help us all appreciate the Father's love in an It Takes a Village series. Imagine being part of a church with students like Tessa and Kaylin and Peyton and Emma, who use the gift of a summer break to help us run the Activate Day Camp, showing Christ's love to some kids. Imagine a church where a person like Katie shows her shepherding skills as she helps a small group of young girls and cares for their spiritual development. Or being part of a church with a guy like Neil, who uses words and emails to consistently encourage people. Imagine being part of a church where people like Jim and Wendy and Daryl and Margaret and Karen and others form relationships over years with a migrant workers farm group, and seeing foreigners become friends and family. Where medical professionals like Rory and Jetty use their healing gifts to run a health clinic in our Vineland location, while someone like Allison uses her administrative gifts to keep everything running smoothly. Imagine psychotherapists and frontline workers serving people experiencing mental health crises and homelessness. Imagine home builders and political activists and people who like filling out forms all coming together to lobby for funding for an affordable housing project in Welland. Or imagine trained chefs and home cooks coming together to prepare and provide healthy, nutritious, delicious meals to people experiencing food insecurity. Imagine people actually picking up extra work shifts so they can stretch their gift of financial giving to help us be more generous with God's love as a church. Or imagine a church where green thumbs use their hands to feed hungry people and beautify the world one vegetable garden and flower bed at a time. Imagine a church where all the gifts of the Spirit come together in a beautiful portrait of Christ's love. And the best part about imagining a church like this is you don't have to imagine it. You just have to look around. It is real and it is happening as ordinary people like you and me are leveraging our gifts to share Christ's love, to be filled by love, fueled by love, and formed into love by the power of the Spirit. Friends, this church that we are a part of, this church is a gift. It's a gift God has given to all of us. And it's filled with so many highly gifted people who have so much to give. But the greatest gift we have to offer is God's incarnational love that we've experienced in Jesus. And if we will be so filled, absorbed in, and consumed by that love that it flows through our gifts, we could become an unstoppable force of incarnational love in our community. We could be the vehicle through which God's incredible love is given to the world around us. This is the kind of church that God dreams of. It's the kind of church that Jesus hung on a cross for. the kind of church that the Spirit has gifted us to become. And it's the kind of church that we eagerly desire to be. There are no great churches, but together we can be a church with great love.
I knew about Southridge, the shelter, before I knew about Southridge, the church. A family member had been a resident in the shelter. We started coming to this church in 2012, and almost immediately I started volunteering in the shelter kitchen. On Monday evenings, for many years, I was involved in the preparation and serving of food to those who had found a temporary home with us. Through my involvement with the shelter, I learned that our similarities as people far outweigh any differences that we may have. I learned that whatever our current circumstances, we all need to feel valued and loved. I learned that having a home and a secure source of food is a privilege that many in our community do not share. And I learned that for the most part, most people appreciate the help that they receive. In the shelter, food security is not an issue, but when you move out into the community and are faced with the high cost of housing and food and a limited income, it quickly becomes an issue. We would talk to the folks who came into Norm's Cafe on Monday evenings, and they shared with us that they hadn't eaten for a day or two, especially as the end of the month approached. In speaking with Chris Fowler and Erica Singer, we decided to see if there was something that we could do to help. We approached leadership to determine the feasibility of starting a program to help food insecurity in our church community. Before we could consider how to help, leadership wanted to know what was available in the community and how anything that we did would fit in with existing supports. To this end, I contacted churches in Niagara who had established food programs and the food bank. From Blessed Trinity Church in Welland, I learned how they managed their program and how it had evolved over time. I visited our local food bank, Community Care, and learned that people can only go to the food bank once a month. At the food bank, each food is assigned a point value, and individuals are only allowed a certain number of points with each visit. If we could provide dry pantry items, which are easier to store, then food bank points could be used for fresh fruits and vegetables, meat, and dairy products. Over 2 years ago, we started Pantry Partners with 5 sponsors and a belief that this was something that our community would rally around. Today, we have over 70 participants. Rarely has anyone waited longer than a month to be assigned a partner. Month after month, bags of food are brought in and taken home. While the exchange of food is tangible, the intangible part of this program is the giving and receiving of love, the generosity of spirit, and the mutual caring for each other. We have other folks who help with inputting information into the computer, keeping the next delivery date sign and norms current, putting information into the community news, delivering grocery bags to those who are housebound, and carrying grocery bags in and out of the church for others. Each participant in this program has value, those with the means to give and those with the heart to receive. For me personally, I have gotten to know an amazing number of wonderful people who make my life richer and demonstrate the true meaning of community. I believe that this all reflects God's work and the true meaning of community, and is an example of following the commandment to love one another as I love you.